समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. So today we start on verse 48 and I'll read the verse. Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyoha sammo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Now from here on, from this stanza onward, we have an exhaustive definition of yoga. And what are the different kinds of yoga? How does yoga apply to life? And as I said earlier, that Patanjali has listed 63 different kinds of yoga. But generally people around the world think yoga is just a set of exercises. That is just one part of yoga. So here, look, there is a definition of yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate. This is a definition he is giving here of yoga. That uchyate means called. And what is called yoga? Samatvam. Samatvam is equipoise, no anxiety in action, no anxiety in performing action. So that is the skill in action. How you should perform action in such a way that there is no nervousness, no anxiety, and you go from success to success. So yoga is a training of the mind to remain in equipoise. Now here, Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. I will first read the meaning to you. Perform action, O Dhananjaya, being steadfast in yoga, abandoning attachment and balanced in success and failure. Evenness of mind is called yoga. Now you see, this is one of the definitions of yoga. Evenness of mind is yoga. This is what the Gita is teaching us to achieve. And it just doesn't only say that you achieve yoga, it is saying how to do it. So it gives you stepwise what to do and what not to do so that you can achieve it. Now see, this, what he says, Sangam Tyaktva. Sangam Tyaktva means give up attachment. Sang is attachment. I plus this, whatever plus. You imagine that me plus money is equal to happiness. Or you imagine me plus my children are equal to happiness. Me plus my house, me plus my beautiful car, my this is equal to happiness. So he says that you should give up because that is a slavery of that object. You become dependent for your happiness on that particular object. Therefore, that you must learn to rise above. You must learn to give it up and go ahead. Now, this phrase, Sangam Tyaktva, comes around 80 times in the Gita. Why I am listing the number to you is to show you the importance of this. Unless and until you give up attachment, you will not be able to build an equipoise in your mind. And then you cannot be called yoga sthita. That means established in yoga. So, see, when you are attaching to anything, you are giving it the ropes. And the ropes are in their hand to make you dance. And they will surely make you dance. Because, see, whatever you are attached to, if all your happiness is dependent on that. If I get this, I am happy. Or if I am near this, I am happy. If I get to consume this, I am happy. Otherwise, I'm not happy. Then that thing gets a power over you. You lend it a whip to whip you with. And that you must never do. Gurudev used to say, never put the keys of your happiness in someone else's pocket. It should firmly be with you. And here, see, abandoning attachment, now he calls him Dhananjaya. Let me explain this first. There is a great misconception amongst Hindus around the world that Hinduism is a religion which says, give up money, give up attachment to money. Don't earn. Earning has got no meaning. That is not what it is. Remember the first chapter. The context of the first chapter is fight for your right. Work up. Fight for your kingdom. Fight for your honor. Fight for your wealth. Fight for your property. Right? That is what Krishna is saying. Don't run away. And don't run away under the excuse that you are committing sin. So Hinduism has never said that do not earn money, but it says do not hoard money for yourself. There is a difference. Here, look at this. Dhananjaya means the generator of wealth. Dhan Anjay means the generator of wealth. This is one of Arjun's titles, mind you. It is a decoration of Arjun. So, where does Hinduism say that dhan is bad or that money is bad? It is not. It respects, in fact, we are the only religion in the world, the whole world, who has a goddess of wealth. There is a festival for the goddess of wealth. And that goddess of wealth is worshipped by all Hindus. We know the importance. But there is the differences that there is a Kuber and there is a Lakshmi. Lakshmi is a goddess of wealth who is always shown as highly decked up in gold, and gold coins are falling from her hand. So falling where? For the benefit of the society around her. Whereas there is one who is called Kuber. And Kuber is not worshipped at all in Hinduism. He is the treasurer. He is the treasurer of the gods. So he hoards the wealth. He saves the wealth for himself. So he is always drawn as a short, podgy man with a huge stomach and very ugly. You must have seen the statue in front of Reserve Bank of India, Kuber. Ugly man. So this is the difference between Lakshmi and Kuber. So hoarding is decried in Hinduism, but generating wealth is awarded, is rewarded, is looked up to. The worship of wealth is looked up to. So much so the worship of wealth is looked up to that many people, Hindus in India, do not wear gold on their feet because it is an insult to wealth. Gold is representative of wealth, right? So they do not wear wealth on their feet, any ornament. Oh. So Dhananjaya, don't mistake this, that generating wealth. Also, you remember Arjun's name? Arjun has come from Arjana. Arjana means to generate, to produce. So just like today, the government honors people who increase the wealth of the country, similarly, Arjun was honored with the title of Dhananjaya. And here Krishna says, perform action, O Dhananjaya, being steadfast in yoga. See, he says, yogastha. I told you that stha has come from the word sthana. Sthana means place. So, placed in yoga, firmly placed and established in yoga. Yogastha kuru karmani. Do your actions firmly established in yoga. And what is the definition of this yoga? Samatvam yoga uchyate. A balance of mind. In one of my previous talks, I had told you that martial art teachers, when they teach their students, they always say that you have to kill the opponent, but with no temper in your mind, no turbulence in my mind. And that is also, you remember the English phrase, a coolly planned murder, or murder in cold blood. So that word cold means absolutely still mind, not a hot mind, hot-headed, not hot-headed murder. Cool murder. That means he is not at all disturbed by doing what he is doing, right? That is cool-headed. So Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya. Now, how should this be accomplished? It should be accomplished only, people say, oh, it is not practical. The theory looks okay, but this is not a practical way of achieving samatva. So they say the practice is only when you learn to detach yourself from the action. Detach yourself from the action and also give up the doership. When you give up the doership, then you become a non-conductor of shocks in life. Understand? Whenever any shock comes to you, there are people who totally break down, and there are people who manage to take it with a lot of poise, with a lot of grace. Now, how does that happen? That happens only because they are able to detach themselves from the happening, whatever is happening. So there is a deep calm inside a person who is established in his inner self. And there is movement only on the surface, but not there, like the deep sea. The example that is given for yoga sthit person is like the deep sea. In the depths of the sea, miles and miles down into the sea, there is no movement of water. It is totally still. The movement is only on the surface. That is for sure. You will show grief. You can show anxiety. You can show turbulence. But from inside, you should be absolutely placidly calm. And to act without attachment, in total hold of yourself, in total control of your mind, that is yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate, it says. Now, see, our reaction to the pinpricks of life is based on the value that you attach to that thing. Think about it. If you do not value the result of that action, you do not feel upset at all, no matter what action it is. Whether it happens or it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter to you. But something that you put a lot of value on, that this must happen, right? Then that is going to make you turbulent. For sure, it is going to make you turbulent. Now, how to achieve the balance in mind is given in a few steps. Like these days, every ad on the television goes, in 3 easy steps, you can do this, and 4 easy steps. So here he gives you the 5 deadly sins which you must never commit if you want to achieve balance in your life, if you want to achieve an equipoise in your life. And equipoise means peace, and peace is equal to happiness. The more turbulent your mind, the more unhappy you are. The more agitation in your mind, the more unhappy you will be. So unless the mind is peaceful, that is why, calmness, samadhi, meditation is advised to the seeker. He calls it Buddhi Yoga. Now, Buddhi Yoga is basically holding on to the Lord in full surrender and not losing the sight of the goal, and also working for a higher goal in life, not just for me and myself. If you work for me and myself, there is bound to be turbulence in your life. There is bound to be irritation and agitation in your life. Leave that to the Lord. You just work. In my last class, I told you that you tell the Lord, I work, you worry. So do only work. Why are you worrying? Because as it is, nothing is in your hand. You can do nothing. You have a right only to remember that verse, karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So you cannot control the result of action. So why worry about something that is not in your hands? Okay, now then to achieve this buddhi yoga, you you must do these things. See, number one, wrong imaginations. Number two, false expectations. Number three, daydreams about the fruit of your action. Number four, anxieties for the results. And number five, fears for the future calamities that have not yet appeared to threaten our lives. We are imagining them. These are the five different things you must never allow your mind to get into. And the mind has a very easy way of slowly gliding into any one of these. And when the mind glides into any one of these, it causes all kinds of agitation. Now, see, number one, let's go one by one. Wrong imagination. You imagine something will benefit you. You imagine that this is the best for you. You imagine, but it may not be. Learn to just stay with the action. Determine that I want to do this, and then just stay with the action. Put all your energy, all your skill just in that action. Do not imagine what will happen and what will not happen. They all actually are related to each other. This thing, see, false expectations, same thing. False expectation is also what? You expected something and something else happened. You expected a false expectation which it could not deliver. It will not never be able to deliver, but you want it. That is false expectation. Daydreams about the fruits of action. That means even before you have got the result of an action, you have already pinned your hopes on it and said, when this happens, how beautiful my life will become. You are daydreaming about something which may or may not happen. So again, you are putting eggs in a cracked pot. It is going to burst and the eggs are going to break. So again, you should not pre-plan the result. Don't try to enjoy the result even before it has come to you. So daydreams about the fruits of action. And then this one, anxieties for the result. Of course, when you are so much attached to the result, you will be anxious. You will be so anxious that you will be nervous in performing while performing your action. Your mind will be so agitated already that you will not be able to think correctly, think systematically, coolly, calmly. You will not be able to make plans. So anxiety for the results, fears for, now this one, see, this is the last one, fears for the future calamities that have not yet appeared to threaten our life. But we are very good at this. We have a special knack for this. Imagining all kinds of wrong things that can happen to you. You always imagine this will happen, that will happen, that will happen, that I'm sure will happen. And most of the times, those things never happen. But by that time that you have been worrying, you have ruined your present. It has robbed you of your present happiness. It has robbed you of enjoying whatever you have today in the anxiety for what you may not have and what will befall you, right? So then they go on. There are umpteen examples I can give you of people whose parents have worried so much about the child. What is going to happen to this child? This child is useless. You know, people will cheat him in the world. He will be a beggar. He will be this. He cannot look after himself. He's too simple for the world. All kind of things. And that child goes from where to where and becomes something and something. So all the fears of the parents that they have lived through are useless. So these are the 5 things you must never, never, because a karma yogi should always, should not find it impossible to practice if he gives up these. If these 5 things are given up by anybody, he becomes detached. A puppeteer cannot make the puppet dance if there is no string attached. It is only that the string is tied to the fingers of the puppeteer that the puppet can dance. So if you do not attach your string to anything or anybody or any situation, then your mind will not dance. You will not be committing nerve-wracking mistakes in life. And those mistakes always happen when the mind is agitated. Okay, in this now then, how do you detach? You detach by trying to understand the ego. What is your ego made up of? It is nothing but a bundle of memories of the past. Without that, your ego here means your individuality. You think something of yourself, whatever you think of yourself, that is your idea of yourself. And your idea of yourself is nothing else but thoughts. Think about it. So, what is this great, grand personality? You hold on to its honor, its respect, its fame, its name, its wealth, this and that. I belong to this family and I belong to that family, and my grandfather was this, and my this one was this, and my family is like that, or whatever. Or even your past own achievements you hold on to. I achieved this, I achieved that, I achieved that. Now, if I don't achieve it, people will laugh. Students become nervous wrecks. Why? A student who has been topping the class, who has been coming first in the class, becomes almost a nervous wreck when the examination is nearby, close by. Why does he? Anxiety for the fruit, attachment to the fruit. That I have studied so much, I have been such a good student. Everybody understands that I will be coming first in class. Supposing I don't come first in class, then what a calamity it's going to be. Now that is a hit to the ego. So if you understand that your ego is nothing else, your individuality is nothing else excepting your own thoughts, think about it. I am this. I am this. I am this. This is my position. This is my reputation. That is all that the ego is comprised of. And this ego always lives in either the burial grounds of the past or the unborn phantoms of the future. It does not let your mind rest. So your whole life, from the womb to the tomb, is a huge life of worry and anxiety to uphold this ego, to guard this ego from hits from the world. Protect it from hits from the world. And mark you, whenever you are upset, whenever you are very, very hurt, whenever, think carefully, dissect what hurt you, and very honestly and deeply think about it, and you will ultimately come to the conclusion that it was your ego that was hit. Somewhere or the other, your ego got hit. Your self-respect, what you call, got hit. Because you think of yourself as this bundle of flesh and bones. And then, so abandoning this and established in equanimity and giving up attachment to any result or object, act in the present. And that will give you inspired action. When you are acting for the good of society, when you are acting that if I achieve this, the people in the world will benefit by my action, that is an inspired living. And that inspired living is a joyful living. And it doesn't, it frees you because you let go from attachments, so it frees you and you live moments of vital inspiration. And then, because your individuality is dissolved. If you are working for somebody else, then the loss and profit that will accrue to that individual does not bother you, is it? That's the difference between a job and working for yourself. When you hold your own business, then you're very, very anxious because the loss and profit is yours alone. If you are working for somebody, then you are doing your best, yes, but there is no anxiety in your mind for the result, because the result will go to the person who owns the business. So that is the difference. So you must let go of your individuality, and that will guarantee you the greatest returns, the maximum returns. Now then, okay. Now, inspired activity, as I said, a painter, inspired. He even forgets to eat and drink. He is so much enjoying the work. A person who's playing a game, every bit of that game he enjoys if he is not hung up on the result. But professional players, see how anxious they become. And once they become nervous, they're dropping every ball. Haven't you seen in games? So it is all the mental hang up that you get for the result of your action that makes you nervous and also makes you agitated. So then here, Krishna says that you must act on, and that is what yoga is. He says, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. So Samatvam Yoga Uchyate means this only, that you do not demand all the time that I must get this, I must get that. That makes a beggar out of you. Be a giver in life, expand your mind, and work to your best capacity. The result will follow just like your shadow follows you, because action and reaction we have done are equal and opposite. So the best performance will get the best result. It's as simple as that. But a man who is nervous and anxious performing, he is not established in yoga. And when you are not established in yoga, as I said, the result will be bad. Let's do the next verse. Durena hyavaram karma buddhi yogadvananjaya buddhau sharanam anvichha krapana phalhetavaha. Krapana. Krapana is a miser, right? Here, Krapana is used as a wretched miser. Okay. Now, look what he says. Far lower than the yoga of wisdom is action. O Dhananjaya, seek thou refuge in wisdom. Wretched are they whose motive is the fruit. Do you notice that verse after verse, even from my last talk onwards, Krishna is again and again saying that those who are hung up on the fruit of action are wretched. You work for it. Nobody is stopping you from working for it. In fact, Krishna is instigating you to work for it and work hard for it. That is all along he is telling Arjuna, get up and fight, get up and fight. So there is no excuse. Even in the last to last verse, remember, he said that inaction is not allowed in the Gita. Krishna says you are not allowed to be inactive. You have to act. You have to work up, dynamically work. So that is not allowed. So what does he say over here? But look, he says here that far lower than the yoga of wisdom is action. Okay. Now, till now, he was extolling action. Now what does he say? That action is far lower than the yoga of wisdom. Yoga of wisdom is jnana. Gyan that teaches you wisdom. That is far superior to action. Now what does it mean? So action, and he again calls him Dhananjaya. See, Dhananjaya, I gave you one meaning, and that is the generator of wealth, right? Now, wealth is of many kinds. Mental equipoise is also a wealth. Everybody doesn't have it. Those that have it are very rich people. Notice also that in India, sadhus and sannyasis who have given up the world are called Maharaj. What Maharaj means emperor or king. So then how come you are calling a beggar at your door who is in tattered rags and has come to beg for his food? In India, you address him as Maharaj. The housewife gives him some food in his bowl and says, Maharaj ji, namaste. So you are giving him food and calling him Maharaj. So Maharaj is a state of mind which totally lacks want. There is no need in his mind. There is no want in his mind. He does not feel incomplete in any way, whether he has something or he doesn't have something. A man who is totally contented is called a Maharaj. To give you an example, a man sitting under a tree in tatters, very barely got any food, and you ask him, how are you? And he says, oh, I'm fine, I'm perfect, I'm very comfortable. I think I can sleep under the tree at night and I'm okay. This is one. I don't need anything. And then there is a king, an emperor. That emperor is all the time thinking, the kingdom next to me is more powerful than me. The king over there has got much more wealth than me. I should be better than him. And he is day and night miserable because of it. And then he ultimately wages war against that kingdom and tries to grab land from that kingdom. So then who is the beggar and who is the Maharaja? The one who does not need, there is no want in his life, is wealthy. That is a sign of wealth. And the one who all the time craves for more and feels dissatisfied with his life, he is the beggar. The objective mind is always dazzled by the world of objects, emotions, and thoughts. The man is all the time only seeking for more, but he never feels satisfied with getting more, because understand that man is not only stomach. There is an emotional personality to man. There is an intellectual personality to man. There are so many other shades in his personality that need to be satisfied, that need uh, contentment, peace. So only by filling your stomach or by adding a 1+ to your possessions, you can never be happy. And man generally is all the time trying to gain from the outside world. He is always trying, I want this, I want this, I want this. So when you continue to do this kind of thing, then the mind takes the sharan of objects. That means it is dependent on objects for happiness. The objects can never give permanent happiness. So there we come to square one. And he says then what? Dhananjay, seek thou refuge in wisdom. So what is the wisdom? He says that wisdom is superior to action, right? So how do you take refuge in wisdom? Knowing fully well, understanding extremely well, and for sure that the outside world can never grant you that joy and peace, then That is the wisdom. So search for that which will give you peace and happiness. Now, see, there are two things over here Krishna is advising to achieve this. That you must side with your intellect. You must not just keep doing what you feel like doing, but you must do what the intellect, through discrimination, advises you to do. That is called Nishchayatmika Buddhi. Nishchayatmika Buddhi means the determining power or discretionary power of the intellect. And Sanshayatmika Buddhi, Sanshay, doubting. Sanshay means to doubt. So Sanshayatmika Buddhi is that Buddhi which is all the time doubting and fearing the future. So that will never, Nishchayatmika means with determined effort towards your goal, you go with peace in your mind, right? So then everything everything that you offer to the Lord, all the actions that you offer to the Lord, not to yourself. If you are offering them to yourself, you will be miserable. Miserable guaranteed. But if you are offering every action to the Lord and saying, I did my best, not only for myself and my family, but for the society at large, that everybody should benefit from my action, that is to live like a master of situations, not like a beggar. So that inner poise is very, very important. Another thing that he says is that you must remain within the zone of the intellect. That will give you wisdom. Intellect is the wise thing in your mind. Mind is instinctual, as I told you. It always goes for what it likes. It goes towards what are its likes and goes away from what are the dislikes. Whereas the intellect is the controlling power of the mind, where it, orders and controls and gives you the direction, chooses the right way, and guides you in that. And that is why Krishna terms his yoga as Buddhi Yoga. I told you this is a coinage by Krishna alone. It is not there in Patanjali Yoga Shastra. So Buddhi Yoga is that where you are in perfect unison with the intellect and you go according to the wise advice of the intellect, not by the mind alone. So this is establishing yourself in Buddhi Yoga. Now, the mental zone, the mind's area, is always tossed about by your likes and dislikes. The mind is controlled by your inherent likes and dislikes. And that is what you keep on jumping. And a skilled worker will always go by his intellect. Then, you say that this sounds very unscientific, that sometimes you give one definition of yoga, the next verse will give you another definition of yoga. In the previous verses, Krishna also used the word Buddhi Yoga. So what exactly is it? There must be one definition. In science, there is only one definition, right? The moment you give 2-3 definitions, the student is confused. And the student is wondering, what exactly is the definition of yoga? What is yoga? So in this next verse, you will get another definition of yoga, and the Lord will explain to you how these different definitions of yoga have been given. So here we leave it here, that Vyasa condemns thoughtless action. Vyasa condemns agitated action. Vyasa condemns desire prompted action. But he says, when he says that wisdom is superior to action, it means don't just act because you felt like doing something. That is instinctual. All animals act instinctual. So you are better than an animal, aren't you? Act wisely. Think in your mind what should be wisdom, and then with single pointed effort, go towards it. So we do this much today, and verse 50 we will do next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.